The church has hurt a lot of people. We're not calling men to something greater than show up.
God's not calling you to waste away. He's calling you to thrive.
You're not calling them into something that you think. You're calling them to become something that God thinks about them. It is so much more than just showing up and trying to not sin. If 10% of the men were fully alive to who God created them to be, could you imagine what the church would look like?
Welcome back to the MakeReady Podcast. My name is Brian Sims, and today I get to talk to Bill Yuhasz. He is the author of More Than You, which you should read. He is the co-host of the Known Legacy Podcast, which you should listen to. And he is also the founder of Known Legacy Ministries, which you should know more about. So sit back and enjoy my conversation with Bill Yuhasz. Bill Yuhasz, welcome.
Glad to be here, man.
Welcome to the podcast show.
I'm excited to be here.
Give me the last year of your life. I want to hear what God's been doing.
Yeah, no, that's all. First thing, it's good to see you again, man. It's always good to see your face. But the last 8 months really has been pretty busy. So as of June 1st, I left my full-time ministry at a church to go full-time into the nonprofit that I lead called Known Legacy. So in that time, and we've seen God do a lot of things, I'd put it this way, it hasn't been easy, but there's been all green lights, and I haven't seen a yellow or a red yet. And so we've seen God do a lot in impacting, connecting with churches, meeting with guys, making new connections, like kind of like, who are you? What do you do? Kind of just sharing my heart. We've done some big events. We've done some connecting events. And then we just finished our first men's retreat the last week of January, which was really awesome to have that. So that's the gunshot. So we can dig deeper if you want to.
Well, that's cool. So it's like a full suite of things.
Yeah.
You know, obviously, you talked to me a year ago, like you have such a passion for disciple makers, pastors, guys that are in the arena, especially ones that feel isolated, alone. I mean, it's a hard position to be in anyway.
Yep.
Times we're in, I can't imagine.
Yeah, I mean, I just read a new statistic. I think it was it said 19%. It said 19% of pastors are getting the care that they need. And when I read that, I don't read that from the basis of some deep care. A lot of times I look at it and I go, about 19% of them are connecting with someone, developing relationships, meeting with guys that they know, which means 81% aren't getting the care that they need, which sadly means, from my perspective, 81% of these guys don't have a friend that they can go to. That's how I took it. Because when you start to talk to these guys, I mean, they are just at the forefront of the attacks of the enemy, and nobody's like, popping streamers and saying, hey, you're doing great all the time. They're getting beat up most of the time. And so for us to be able to go in and connect with that, in fact, the whole heart of what we're doing, there's this idea where, man, we see that men need to be lifted up and encouraged and equipped to go out, just like you're doing with your ministry, to really understand who they are as a child of God, and then have good conversations with other men who are like-minded to go, man, let's go do this together. It's that whole thing where it says the gates of hell will not prevail. I mean, that being a defense mechanism, we need men to prevail against the gates of hell. So we're not, when I look at the American church overall, we're not necessarily calling men to that. We're calling them to know more and sin less. And I think what we're doing in our ministries is calling them to come alive.
Do you think that's a new thing? Do you think culture's pushed men that direction and we've lost that? Or do you think that's been a constant problem with organized church?
So as not to alienate churches,
right.
I don't think that's where they meant to. I think a lot of it comes down to there's needs, and the needs became louder than the desires. Like, oh, we need someone to serve here. We need to fix the lights in the ceiling. We need, we build up these bodies. These bodies need a place to worship, and then we start to deal with the place they worship more than the people that worship in it. And so I don't think it was intended that way. But I do think that's kind of what happened because the squeaky wheel gets the grease.
Yeah.
And so in that, we've, from my perspective, lost the heart of a lot of men who are just come back with the phrase of, I'll try to do better next week. And we're like, that's not even the goal. Like, we're not even hitting the target, you know? And so that's kind of where my heart bleeds with this, to see men wake up, gear up, and come alive to who they've been called to be, versus show up and put in your money, put in your tithe, put in your time, and then go home, figure out what's for lunch, you know, that kind of thing. So
what's the difference between someone who's a lay person in the church and getting after it and really engaging with the community, and a guy that's vocationally, you know, in it? Pastor, youth pastor.
Yeah, I mean, hopefully not, shouldn't be that different. But the problem is, even me, so I've been in ministry full and part-time for 20 years. And there's a lot of times that I got caught up in the business of church, to where you forget that people have normal day-to-day struggles and battles, and they don't go to a place that's church every day. You know, they go to the drudges of life a lot of times. And I think we forget that difference. So then when they come in on a Sunday, they almost feel like there's a standard that they're held to, that they're like, but you don't understand what I go to every week. You get to come to, from their perspective, you get to come and hang out at Jesus's house all week. And then I have to go to these other places, you know? And so I think that's the difference, is that perspective change of man, it's hard for them to almost, to some degree, I feel like, guys to accept what's being said on a Sunday morning, because it feels so distant from the life that they live from, you know, Monday to Saturday.
So they don't, it's just not relatable.
Yeah. I mean, to help me out with that too, because it feels like when I see these guys that I know that I'm walking with, again, it almost feels like what they're hearing, they can't do, like they can't attain because of all the roadblocks in their life, all the things they have to do.
Yeah,
you know,
like,
but,
okay, preacher man, sounds cool, but you don't know my life, like, because you're at the church house all day.
Yeah. They get up at 5, 6 o'clock in the morning. They get to work. And then we try to, and I've done this. That's why I say we, as in I'm as much of a culprit as anybody else. We try to call these men to a Saturday morning breakfast, let's say. That's an easy example. And that's the one day a week that they're either going to their kids' soccer game, or they can lay in bed next to their life. You know, they can lay in bed next to their wife for more than 10 minutes. And then the kids crawl in bed, and you're like, and then you think I want to call them away from that to go and listen to a message? And then there's that feeling of guilt from their side to go, well, man, I should be there because, you know, I just, like, it's when they have something for me. And the church is like, well, the men aren't faithful, essentially. I'm not hearing that clearly. You know, I'm not hearing someone say, well, the men aren't faithful because they don't show up on a Saturday. But that's kind of the feel you get, like, oh, where were you, man? We really wish you were there yesterday. I wish you could have been there. And then instead it's like, you almost want to celebrate, hey, you're finally hanging out with your family. You're doing the thing that you should do. So I think it's trying to meet that standard at a church with the reality of where a guy is. And we're just not quite there when I start looking at, you know, a lot of churches that either I've attended or guys that I've talked to. Pastors are like, we're trying to get these guys here, but they just don't want to come. And it always comes down to like a men's breakfast or something like that. And you're like, but it's a Saturday morning. And a 25-year-old with two little kids, I'm like, I don't want you there on Saturday morning.
Like, should they be there? No.
You shouldn't be there. Exactly.
Yeah.
So
I wonder what the answer is, because I totally get that. I mean, I even have a hard time listening to a sermon on audio, because I'll usually get 2 or 3 things from a sermon. Mm-hmm. Is it worth listening to an hour and a half to get 2 or 3 things, or would it be better to just read it in a tweet?
Fair. So I was discipled differently. Like, that's the thing. Like, so I walk into a church and there's discipleship all the time. I hear the word discipleship, path, which is fine, but it always makes me think about The Princess Bride, you know, and Inigo Montoya, and he goes, you keep using that word. I don't think it means what you think it means. And that whole idea of discipleship is just transformation, transferring information to someone else. And then in 6 months, you find 3 guys that you transfer information to. And whereas I just don't see it quite as linear as that, as much more an organic mix of relationship and doing life. I mean, the guy that discipled me never came up to me and said, "Hey man, I want to disciple you." He said, "Hey, grab those chairs and help me." And then we would just do life. We would set up things. We'd go to events together. I would help him with his car, or if he needed something in his house, he would help me with something. And then, not even realizing it all the time, we were just speaking life to each other. He mainly was speaking to me at that point. I didn't have much wisdom to share. But I remember when I would have crisis moments, and he would say, "Bill, but you know the truth. It's blank." And I because I trusted him, and I believed that God's word was true, those two together made me go, "Huh, yeah, you're right." And instead of, I've learned so much that I've packed it in that now I'm ready for whatever happens, like, no, I still have crisis moments, but I can now go to this guy that I trust. And that is where I go back to that 19% that these guys have no one that they can trust. So we've lost that as a high desire of, what about just finding a guy that you can hang out with, that eventually you can share your life with?
What do you think is driving that? I mean, are there experiences that are just obliterating men's trust in other men?
Well, I think just like you said before, the church has hurt a lot of people. I think in the past, the church has hurt a lot of people. And when I mean that, I don't mean like just that's their intent. I just think through a series of people who are involved, the church is messy. Someone gets cheated, someone gets hurt, someone gets abused, and then thereby they cast that on every church. And then those stories grow. The enemy uses that. And then, you walk into a church, and I remember I would talk to the other pastors when I was on staff, and I would say, man, I don't know the actual statistic, but it's like 30% of people that walk into this church think I either want to hurt their kid, take their money, or, cheat them out of something. And I'm like, so we're already fighting the other side of that to go, how do we now prove to you that we don't want anything from you? But then at the same time, we're kind of going, but we want something from you. Like we want you to serve or do whatever. And if you don't, you're not really faithful. And so I think that's where people go, I'm good, man. I've had, you get bit a couple times, you're like, I'm good. And you just kind of lay in the back. So I think that's one of the struggles I have is we're not, and I guess that's where I would say we're not calling men to something greater than show up. And that's where I think the struggle is.
What's the calling? Is it the same for every guy, or is it?
I go back to John 10, and Jesus is talking, and he said, man, the thief comes to steal, kill, and destroy, but I came to give life and give it abundantly. And that has been perverted everywhere in the American church and pretty much all over the place. But the idea of the abundant life and this idea of what does the abundant life look like? And when I go back to that reality, hopefully I'm answering your question when I say this, when I think about the abundant life now, there were pursuits that I wanted to do all these great things. But I picture me like laying down at night and just that kind of, I'm doing what I'm called to do. And I think that is the calling for men. Now, is that, do I leave my job and start a new business? Do I make this attempt to try to walk on water to do something great? Or is it something as simple as, do I just go home and start speaking life to my wife because I've never done that? Yeah, I think it's all of those things. So then from there, it becomes a very intimate journey with God to go, you're calling me to something more. There's something in my heart that you've put in me that you've not put in anybody else, that to us can feel vanilla because it's all we think about, it's all we process. But between you and God, it's like, this is an incredible thing that you need to understand about yourself. And then once you do that, living in that calling in the context of community with other guys.
And that didn't happen in isolation.
No, not at all.
Never does.
Not at all.
I mean, I see so many guys that I went to college with, I'll catch up with from time to time. And a very common narrative is, they're going to church.
Yeah.
They go to their job. They talk to 2 or 3 guys a week at their job or at church, maybe, and they're passing conversation. There's no deep, authentic community, man-to-man, brotherhood. I mean, do you feel that? I don't think I'm isolated in feeling that way.
No, and that's it. I was speaking at an event this last week on Saturday, and I'd made a very similar phrase to that of, man, it is so much more than just showing up and trying to not sin. Like I used to say, like my son loved the movie Cars when he was a little kid, and I had a lot of time as I was starting a business and trying to do ministry and all those kind of things that I had time to sit there and watch the movie with him. And I remember Mater would show up, and he'd be like, he'd pull up and he was sitting there, and then Lightning McQueen or Doc or whatever would pull up and say, Mater, what did I tell you not to do? And he goes, to not to. And I think most guys in their life in the American church are just trying to not to. They're trying to not touch the wet paint. And I'm like, that sounds really boring.
What are you doing? You're just sitting there thinking about the paint.
I just hope I don't. Long. Yeah. It's like, I'm back on the weight loss journey right now. And I'm like, if I sat there and said, don't eat chocolate, all I'm sitting there is thinking about chocolate the whole time versus I want to hold my great grandbaby. Or versus I want to, be able to bend over and not everything pop and crackle at the end of my day. So I'm like, so the chocolate is a very little of the issue compared to who I want to be. And I think that's it. We are not calling men to who God has created them to become. Instead, we're just calling them to some level of maybe, some level of like, I don't even know the word. I'm trying to get the right word. We're calling men to some level of conformity. To just say
normalcy.
Yeah, just do the right. This is who you should be, but instead to pull men into the journey of who has God specifically created you. Psalm 139, we're fearfully and wonderfully made. So there's something that you can do in a gifting. Like obviously in this podcast, I've already seen the skills and giftings that you have that I don't have. And I'm like, and nor do I get excited about. But if you're excited about yours and you're doing what you're called to do, and then I'm excited about mine, I'm doing what I'm called to do. Imagine if we had men working together like that, and they were like, oh, then there wouldn't be garbage men. I'm like, are you sure about that? Because I bet you there's someone out there that was called to be a garbage man to go, I know a way to destroy this waste and create some way in which this doesn't have to exist and then create energy from it. And instead they're out doing something else because they didn't think that it was worthy enough. So again, terrible example, but the reality of calling men beyond where they are.
Yeah, I heard a friend of mine put it in a way that it was like, God's not calling you to waste away. He's calling you to thrive.
Yeah.
Go thrive. What makes you thrive? What gets you out of bed in the morning?
Yeah.
What do you have energy to do? In the context of what is biblically permissible.
Correct. I remember, I don't know if it was, I think it was Erwin McManus. He said, the world was created with one no and everything else was a yes. It was one no. Don't eat from that fruit of that tree. But can we? Just don't eat that. So you're saying that we can, yep, but don't do that. And the world still exists with one no. It's just sin. And we've put so many barriers on that. We're like, listen, we just need to honor God with what we do, but then that kind of means like we kind of look at honor God and go, that must mean don't mess up. Like, no, that's not what he's saying. Like this idea of it, if this is for the glory of God and God, I want to move forward doing what you've called me to do. Just if this isn't of you, shut it down. But until then, I'm going to just walk full force because that is being obedient. I believe you've called me to this. Boom. It's Peter walking on water. You start thinking about that. And then in those moments, as you start reading through that, one thing I didn't realize for a long time was that Jesus never invited Peter out of the boat. He was just like, if you read the scripture, could you imagine so there is Jesus maybe 20, 30 feet away, like bobbing in the water, just sitting there. And then Peter's like, I don't want to be there, Okay, can I come out? He's like, yeah, come on out. And so the moment that he put his hand on the side of that boat to then step his foot over, from that point, nothing made sense. Like, even now, can you describe to me what it felt like to walk on water? It was awesome. I don't know how I did it, but I stepped out. It made no sense. It wasn't logical. And from that moment, he had to keep his eyes on Christ and keep stepping. And I think about that so much in our journey that even me, I want things to make sense. I want it to work out. And I'm getting better with living in the tension of the unknown, but I still don't love it. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
But every time that I've done it, I've not regretted the decision that I've made. We've never traded down with God. I can believe you're probably in the same boat. You won't trade down when you choose to pursue after God. Even if it feels hard, the end result is not going to be, oh man, I really wish I didn't do that. It's, man, God, you really brought me through a journey. But at the end, I got to see a power and a side of you that Most people wouldn't.
Because he's faithful.
Yeah.
And all things work out to the good, to those who love the Lord.
Yes.
And if, what a gift hindsight is. If you can take a second and look back and see, God did all of this, not because of me, in spite of me, through me. And man, that is what a trip that is to look back.
Yeah, Acts 4:13 says that they looked on Peter and I think James, and they said, and they were uneducated men, but they knew that they had been with Jesus. Mm-hmm. And I have nothing against education. I love learning more. In fact, I'm trying to learn more about World War I right now, because you come to the age where you either start learning about brisket and smoking meat, or what, so I'm like, I'm going to do both. While I'm smoking a brisket, I'm going to read a book on World War I. But so you start to get into this pursuit of that, and man, you just see this idea of sorry, I totally lost my train of thought there. But you kind of say, wait, what was your last question?
I know you got me on World War I now.
I know. I'm
now
sorry.
I want to ask questions about World War I.
Exactly. Sorry. I know that you can edit all this, so we're good. But I just think that this idea of calling men out and man, challenging them to come alive is something that I don't see corporately in the American church. And it's not a dive at them, because as I meet these pastors, it's not because they're sitting there going, I don't want to do this. It's that they got caught up in the cycle, and they've got to keep the lights on and deal with issues. And then you deal with a whole nother side that these pastors are dealing with, that is a group of men or women in the church that want to take it in a different direction, but it's his flock that he loves. And so he's got to gently massage it. He can't be like, no, like, because you'll lose that flock, or you'll kind of alienate them. And so you want to gently call them in to something greater. And so then to say, well, I'm trying to keep connection with them, but then much less call them out. That's a big chasm for them to have to walk through. And so I think that's where, again, even as I go back to Matthew 4:13 or Acts 4:13, that these simple, uneducated, ordinary men had been with Jesus. And I think that's what our men need, is someone to say, man, I don't know what you're doing. I don't know who you are, but man, I know that you're doing something great for God, and I want to do something just like you. Like, man, what is so different about you? Man, what do you have that I don't have? I mean, could you imagine if we had a group of men, if 10% of the men in any church that we were in were fully alive to who God created them to be? Could you imagine what the church would look like?
If most men realized that they weren't alone.
Yeah.
I mean, just imagine what we could accomplish. And I mean, God's just waiting to sit there. I mean, he's going to accomplish what he wants to accomplish, right?
Yeah.
I was talking to somebody this morning. I had lunch with a coach that coached my dad in high school.
Wow.
And he was the FCA coordinator. This was this coach's first job out of school. He's going to go be the I don't know if he's special teams, offense, assistant coach at Bryan High School. And he has all of these young men that he's like, I'm going to disciple these men, and they have FCA camp coming up. Well, they had somebody drop out at the last minute and had one spot. And who does he invite to come? My dad. My dad ends up accepting Christ at that camp, transforms his life. Full circle, I had lunch with that coach today. And we were talking about all the things that happened because of that one guy dropping out and my dad showing up to that camp.
That's incredible.
That happens a trillion times a day.
Yeah, as we were talking earlier, the thought that came to mind was the bites of bread. And I think that, I have this belief that there's going to be another great awakening. As I read and I see the heart of people wanting to come alive, there's a tension of people that are like, I don't even want to come to church right now, or they just feel like they're not there. But there's this big part of me that says, man, there is this huge desire for, or how do I say it? There is a tension that I see in these men that they're like, I want more than just showing up. And as I think more about that, man, my heart just goes out to this idea of really, it's not going to happen over like the giant, 30,000 guys together. I love that stuff. I mean, I love hearing 1,000 guys worship, but I'm seeing more now that it's going to happen over cups of coffee. And I believe the way that it happens over those cups of coffee is as you come alive and someone's like, hey, can I just pick your brain for a minute? Like, Brian, what is so different about you that I need, that it's going to come one-on-one? And I really think it's more like the underground church, where it's like we have one conversation with one person and then that grows. And that doesn't just change them. That's the bite of bread that I'm talking about that then changes their entire family. Like that their kids are like, Dad, something changed in Dad and I want to be like Dad now. And then ergo the rest of the legacy. So I think that's how I'm seeing it change when this great awakening will just be all of a sudden, boom. I think men will step up and go, I need to just pull this guy along and share that hope. Just like that. One thing at a time, one decision to go, I'm going to just meet with this guy. But most guys, like you said, live in isolation and they're too afraid. So I think the challenge is to say, if you have that on your heart, if you're listening to this and you're like, there's this guy I've been thinking about, you need to just call him.
Yeah.
And take him out to coffee. Or take him out to lunch and say, hey man, how are you? Like, let me hear your story. It's not that difficult, but we've made it so difficult.
Yeah. Just engage. Like just go.
Yeah.
Like you have no idea what's going to happen, what conversations are going to come up.
Yeah. Like you don't need to be like, hey brother, let's get in a discipleship relation. It's like, but we just say, hey man,
pull up the Bible.
Exactly.
Here's my full Bible study I've had planned for the next 15 times we get together.
Exactly. Talk. But like, hey, tell me about your family and then see what God does with that. And hearing their story and knowing why they're the person that they are, and the decisions that they've made or the limitations that they put on themselves. It's amazing what people will share if they trust you.
Yeah.
So,
man, men really struggle with identity.
Yeah.
Especially today.
Yeah.
And I think that's a trickle down from what we've been talking about. What have you seen in the men that you've been talking to? And this may be kind of just a repeat of what we've been talking about, but okay. Golly, I really have a heart for men that just struggle with who they are in Christ. And that is what has led them to isolate, led them to refuse brotherhood, led them to not be disciplined, because they just don't believe that they are who God says they are.
Yeah, I think it adds to what we've been talking about, because there's so many guys who, again, we make it so difficult. Oh, well, what would I have to offer these guys? Quite frankly, not much beyond Jesus, but with him, so much. This is where I think we lose it, is we feel like we need to have this prepared statement for these guys. Whereas instead, it's us understanding who we are in Christ. Fearfully and wonderfully made, more than conquerors, created for good works, that we have a God who in Zephaniah 3:17 sings over us. If we believed that, that is enough to cast on somebody else. So then it's not even, well, I think this. It's, well, if I believe God's word's true, and this is what it says about us, then I can cast this on you. Even if I don't know you, I could say, you're valuable. Like Ephesians 2:10. In that word I love. I don't remember where I heard it first, but you'd see this word, we are his workmanship in Christ. And I would always picture an Indian whittling out a canoe. I don't know why. Just like he's working on me, But in the Greek, it's the word poema, which means symphony or masterpiece. Mm. So then to look at another guy and be like, well, you're a masterpiece. End of discussion. Not because I believe it, not because I even feel it in my bones, but because either God's word is true or let's not do this anymore. And it's the same thing with you are more than a conqueror. And I think about this as we were talking earlier. That's that brotherhood. That's that armor bearer that men are missing. Like you're talking about, they need an armor bearer. And so many times we don't feel like we're adequate enough to be an armor bearer. We have all the tools because of what God has given us, not because of what we have developed or earned. It's I can already, in the beginning of, if I became a believer yesterday, I could then cast all of that on somebody else and say, no, because I'm a follower of Jesus, I'm a new creation. I am fearfully and wonderfully made. I am, God's going to finish what he started in me. He's going to do the same thing for you. And I think about Jonathan and the armor bearer. And I think about that story, and you're probably familiar with it, but I'll just kind of go through it really quick with this, is that in that story, Jonathan kind of looks up and sees the Philistines. There's 6,000 of them. And he's like, man, I want to go take this up. And so, the armor bearer is like, hey, I'm with you. Let's go do this. So he climbs up the rocky crag or whatever. So he's like basically rock climbing, and then gets up there and kills 20 guys with his swords. And spoiler alert, you can read it in, Kings, or I think it's 1 Samuel somewhere in the beginning, but you'll have to search it out. And so here he is. He's up there fighting. These guys are fighting. All of a sudden, the Philistines wake up and they just start killing each other. And then there's an earthquake, and you're like, oh my gosh! And then and the nation of Israel, this whole group, lo and behold, is sitting over here on this side, scared, not ready to like engage the battle. All of a sudden, they get encouraged and they just run up. They start attacking them. They just chase them away. Amazing victory. Why? All because at one point, Jonathan leaned over and said, hey, man, I'm going to go do this, and I think God's with me. You want to go with me? And he's like, I'm with you, buddy. If that guy had said no, what would have happened to that story? And we don't put that much on ourselves as children of God to go, man, God has called me to equip broken men. And when I mean that, God has called every man to equip broken men, to say, I'm with you. Let's go try this. And to call them out. Again, you're not calling them into something that you think. You're calling them to become something that God thinks about them. That's a lot easier when you're like, these aren't even my words. I'm just cheating the Creator. Don't
take my word for it.
Exactly. So could you imagine if at the end of this podcast, somebody shut it off and this person's been on my heart. I'm going to call them right now. I'm not even going to text them. I'm going to call them and go, hey, let's go grab lunch. Mm-hmm. Man, I'm thinking of you, and I'll be praying for you. I mean, when I have someone say, hey, I'm praying for you, it changes the paradigm of my day. You mean someone else is thinking about me? That's pretty cool. And so imagine if we had that times 1,000 or that times 10,000, what would our world look like?
Golly. What would it look like?
Dude, I think we'd be an unstoppable force. And when I mean that, a force for the glory of God, that I think you would see men rise up. Because when we start to call men out to who God has created them to become, it changes the game. Because then you've got the Holy Spirit that's engaging. It's like a Scud missile at this guy that cannot be stopped. The word of the word of the Lord will not return void. That is the word of the Lord. Like, I know you are a masterpiece. I know you are fearfully and wonderfully made. The thing you hate about yourself, God did on purpose because he loves you. And you cast it on someone. Could you imagine that we would have men lifted up and empowered? We'd have 10,000 Jonathans out there changing the world for Christ. And that's why I believe there'd be another great awakening, and men would come alive. And all of a sudden one day we're like, government, we don't even need the government. We're going to do things our way. We're going to help people the way we need to, or whatever. I'm not trying to get political, but I'm saying, like, we don't need another resource. We as men are going to rise up and love our families. I've met and been around people who have willingly given their life, or know someone who has given their life, martyred for the gospel. And a lot of these men were not like thunder and lightning coming down behind them, like, come and take me. They're like, listen, I want to go home and see my family. But so I really don't want you to kill me, but please, like I don't want to die, but I also can't deny this. So I'm sorry, you're going to have to kill me. I would love to see men of God in this culture, in our America, rise up like that and go, listen, I'm not going to deny what God is doing in me. I'm not going to not pursue the heart of God. And I'm like, and for the sake of my family, for the sake of the gospel, for the sake of the glory of God, and I'm sorry, like, you're going to, you might have to kill me for it. I don't want to die, but I can't say no. That's what I would think we would see.
Talk to me about World War I.
Nah.
Oh, because then we're going to get into smoking meat. But yeah, I concur with you on that time in history as being fascinating. Yeah. I've been recently doing a deep dive into Sir Ernest Shackleton.
Okay, I haven't got that far.
Oh, okay. Man. So it's the same time as World War I. It's the expedition, the doomed expedition down to Antarctica to try and cross it.
Yes. Okay, so I did hear, I read in a leadership book about him and how, like, we will die as men. He kind of wrote that. Yeah.
It's fascinating. They go down there, they get stuck in the Weddell Sea, which is in Antarctica. It freezes. It takes them 2 years to get back. Oh my gosh. All 23 of them, I believe, made it back alive. They didn't lose one man.
That's crazy. And wasn't there another group that did it and they ended up dying. Like,
there
was another group and they
just,
they were unprepared. So, well, what I have learned, and this is interesting, little fun fact, is I started learning about World War I, because I love World War II stuff. Like, I love it. In fact, I just watched The Last Rifleman last night, and that's a tearjerker right there, man. I don't know if you've seen it yet, but it's really good. It's about a 92-year-old man. It's loosely based on truth, but he basically is in a nursing home in Scotland and in I think Ireland, and he makes his way to Normandy through a series of events. He makes his way down there, and he's the last rifleman from his like regiment. So anyways, awesome story if you get a chance. No, we didn't get funding from them. Sorry. The thoughts and views expressed here do not necessarily represent that. But I do, the one thing I found out. So obviously they say the war started because Archduke Franz Ferdinand, and his wife Sophie were killed and caused the war. Well, it was interesting during the first little like parade to the event that he was going to, the car behind him blew up, and so then they basically raced off. He was safe. Well, he wanted to go and visit those who had been hurt in the hospital, and so he was leaving, and when he left, his driver took a wrong turn. And as he took that wrong turn, the gunman was sitting on the side of the road, standing on the side of the road. So he pulled out his pistol, boom, a shot in Franz Ferdinand. It hit his jugular, I think, and he hit Sophie, or his wife, and sorry, it's like I know her. He hit Sophie, and so killed her on impact, and then Franz Ferdinand died, I think, like 10 minutes later from his wounds. But if that driver hadn't, and he did, I don't think he meant to, he took a wrong turn. If he hadn't taken that wrong turn, the tensions would have been high. Probably something else would have caused the war, but that event wouldn't have happened. Franz Ferdinand may not have died, and might have led his people. So I'm just saying, like, it's interesting what one little mistake could do to cause all that. So, make sure you're watching your Google Maps correctly.
I know, yeah. Don't go down that alley.
So,
in looking back at World War I, because I think there's so much to learn from history.
Yeah.
Obviously the Bible is our source for everything.
Yeah.
But there's so much common grace that God provides through history, in the fact that we can look back and see God's providence. And I think major inflection points like World War I, World War II, Civil War, Revolutionary War, obviously all the ones that relate to us, are just chock full of stories of men choosing to be exceptional.
Yeah.
Have you run across any of those stories specifically?
I mean, honestly, I'm a big Churchill fan. So we got to go I took my son, and we did this thing when he was 11. We called them the Lucky 11 trip. They can go anywhere they wanted to go in the world. Now, we're not super wealthy and all that kind of stuff. But we're like, at those moments, we figured that they're 11 years old, they can go into those things. Well, he wanted to go to London. And so we got to go to the war rooms, which was amazing. Because I don't know if you're familiar with those, but like you probably are if you're a history buff. But essentially, right after the war, they shut the door thinking they were going to come back in like a week. Didn't come back till like 1984 or something like that. Opened up, and everything was just like exactly where it was. Like the red phone that could call the president. I mean, all of this stuff. At the time, Churchill had like the best bed, like the most Posturepedic bed. I mean, now it's like a college mattress. You know what I'm saying? But I think about that when you think about extraordinary men. Again, he wasn't perfect. None of these men are. But the idea that he overcame so much, he had a stutter, which then made we shall defend our isles, like he just, all those things that he walked through. He was, shorter, fatter, like he's my role model, But I mean, like, no, he's one of those guys.
Cigar in the morning.
Exactly. Yeah. There you go. And he didn't, I know he fought in the war. He fought in the war in Africa, I believe, things like that. But I think he had limitation after limitation, and people looked down on him. But man, the overall, he didn't give up. And I love those stories, whether it's in the scriptures, whether it's anywhere, all these other places. It's the underdog story, and I think, but we live in such a world of comfort that we don't have to be, that if we are the underdog, we have enough around us to keep us comfy. We can go play a video game. We can go and watch a movie. We can escape this reality. And so many people can't. And so I think it caused more men at that point to either buck up or give up. And I think more of them bucked up. And I think there's a lot more that want to, but we haven't called them to that.
The the guys from that expedition to Antarctica that all made it back, most of them went and served in World War One immediately following.
Wow.
They went from 2 years in the Antarctic surviving off of whale blubber and seal blubber to,
Wow.
okay, now I'll go fight for, and many of them died like immediately.
Man, I grew up in the VFW post. My dad was there, and so I got to meet a lot of these heroes and things like that, and who they would never claim to be heroes. That's not a euphemism. That's not a false ideology of like, man, these guys really were like, no, I'm not a hero because my buddy who died, he was the hero. I was lucky, and I look at them like, you guys are heroes.
Heroes.
But I think we have less of those, because we're so far removed from these things, and we've so like, we've just kind of, we've made war such an entertainment thing, even with our video games and things like that. I'm not against them, like they're fun, but it's almost like we've just numbed ourselves to the realities of war, like we just expect it. But it's also like, I just don't see that we've kind of equated both together, where we have this group of a younger generation that, man, they've got the comforts, they've got the things they want, they got everything that they need. They don't have to live in this reality, because in this other one, they are a superstar. They are and so I think there's something about that. The more that I looked at, I'm like, there's a lot of comfort. There's a lot of comforts. We worked with the church. So I got to go to Thailand 2 years ago to work with a church called the Mayflower Church. And when I was over there, I mean, they had been running for a few years, like 2019. They ended up leaving China to go to Jeju Island in Korea. Pastor Pan, the leader, he kind of felt like, man, it's time to go. And everyone's like, okay, we're going to follow you. They were getting persecuted. And so when they left, they were there. And then, man, within 2 months, the borders closed. COVID happened. So they were kind of safe. Because they were getting persecuted by the CCP, and then eventually moved to Thailand, and I saw them in Thailand. So we're already like 2 years into this journey of uncomfortableness, and man, I think about those guys at the VFW post, these heroes, and I think about these guys here, and they didn't sign up for all of that. They didn't sign up to be running for 2 years, but they were still a community that said, this is so valuable to me. This is so important, that they knew what they were willing to die for. And I guess it inspires me to say, what am I willing to give my life for, kind of thing. And I just don't see that corporately, if that's the word, if I can use it. I don't see that as a society right now, that we're willing to give up something for that. Like, we've lost our causes of what's valuable, other than if it affects me. If it affects me, then it bothers me. If it doesn't affect me, and that almost goes back to the Holocaust, where I just took my family to Boston for Christmas. Christmas, New Year's, we kind of hung out in Boston because we figured it's the coldest place on the face of the earth. Why not just go there? And but we went and as we're by Quincy Market, it's one of the areas up there. There's a Holocaust kind of like memorial up there, and on one of them, and I can't remember, I'm going to butcher the phrase, but it said, man, they came for the artists and I wasn't an artist. They came for they came for the Christians. I wasn't, or whatever. And then finally they came for me, and there was no one there to protect me. And I'm going, man, I almost feel like we're back into that with, well, this doesn't affect me, so I'm not going to say anything. I think that's what we need is, what are we worth? What are we willing to die for? So.
Well, I mean, and layer that on top of the, hard times make for strong men, and strong men make good times make weak men.
How does it go? It's like strong men make good times make weak men make hard times make strong men.
Yep.
Kind of whatever it is.
Round and round we go.
Yeah, round we go. And I think we're in that zone, because I just, and when I mean that, like, I lost sight for a long time of what was valuable. It was just get through the next thing, the process, even in church. And I don't think people do it out of the idea of like, I just don't care. It's that there's so much coming at them. I think even, what was it, Orwell's 1984, it said like, and we entertain them with game and gambling, kind of thing. The idea of like, we have everything we need. I don't care what's going on over here. But until that moment when we're about to beep our last, so I think if anything, if we can get guys back to that moment to go, man, at the end of my life, is what I'm doing now worthy of my time? Sometimes it's a no for me, and I've got to reassess. So I'm not coming here as some expert to say, and now let me tell you what I do every day, my 8-step routine.
I think what's so hard about that is that's not a binary thing.
Yeah.
That's a real heart thing.
Yeah.
And I think that's something that's really hard for guys because it's a feel thing.
Yeah.
And at some level, it's, you can't point to, I did this and this is what I should do because it says it right here in Scripture, I should do it.
Yeah.
And you have to go through this, inward personal assessment of, am I doing the max that I can do?
Yeah.
That's hard. That's really hard for me.
Yeah. Well, and I think that's it. Even with what we do with Known Legacy, I think one of the things we try to do is put a rock in everybody's shoe. And I feel like that's my calling, is just to put a rock in people's shoe. Like, man, it's not so much are we doing enough, but are we doing what we're called to do? That again, go back to that at the end of our life when we laid on our head and just kind of, I'm done what I'm supposed to. Like I said, I only a few months ago, I buried my mother. She ended up dying of a brain tumor. And I mean, we didn't have this forever deep relationship, but through a series of events, we reconnected to where she became my dare I say, my mama again, and I think it caused me to look back and go, what do I need to do? Is there something I need to say? Is there something I need to do? Or, if I bring myself, if I was to look at everybody who's listening to go, if you had a year to live, now I know that people could blow that off, but I'm like, put yourself in that shoes. You have a year to live. What's most important right now? And some would say travel, some would say, but when you really dig past all of that, it's what is the most important? Who would you want to travel with? Yourself? No. So who do you want to travel with? What do you want to do? What's most important? And start to dig that down. And I think that's when we can get to that point and say, man, this is who I want to be. If I had a year or 5 years, what would I do with that? Someone said one time, man, I want to give you $10 million right now. But the only catch is you die tomorrow. And you hear that and you're like, well, then I wouldn't take the $10 million, which therefore then says that your life is worth more than $10 million. But then we pursue after the finances. I do the same thing. So to then say, I like money. Money's great. And if you want to give me more money, I'm more than happy to take it. You know what I'm saying? But the idea is the end result of that's still not going to satisfy. It's still not going to make me feel whole and complete. So what is those things that I'm going, this is what will make me feel whole and complete? And whatever that fills in that blank, man, hopefully, Jesus as your Savior. That's the biggest thing. Because again, he's the only hope in the world. And that's why I still believe in the local church. Because Jesus is the only hope in the world, and the local church is his avenue to share this hope. It's his body. So if we can then use that in this context, not just to go and serve in the nursery, which is great, but to go, God, you've called me to this local group of messy people who are all messed up. What's my role in that? And start walking towards that. And that would change, I think that would change everybody.
Man, we live in a culture where the grease is the goal. It's all of these resources, all of these, tools that we have at our disposal is just grease. And we're just drowning in the vat of it. We're not using it.
No, not at all.
Imagine an army of men that would do that.
It'd be amazing.
Yeah.
But I think it starts with one person inviting one person. And not inviting them to church, inviting them into their life.
Ooh, yes.
Hey, just
fraternity.
Yeah. I mean, I never got to join one because I went to a Bible college, which was 80 people. So we didn't have
not in the specific of fraternities, but just the idea of fraternity, the idea of brotherhood, the idea of living life next to each other, and that just is something that is so lost to so many men because they don't know how to define it. Therefore, they don't know how to pursue it.
Yeah. Henry David Thoreau said that most men live lives of quiet desperation and die with the song still in them. And I think that's it. If we can call men out to the song that God put within them, first thing that automatically puts value on, man, I just need to free more. I mean, we literally, my son wanted to watch The Walking Dead forever, and I eventually succumbed to it and watched it with him because I was like, well, I'm not letting you watch this on your own. And but the more I look at The Walking Dead and I compare our world, even in the church, just the zombie-esque nature of people that go, just do my part, get my thing, get home, go to Rosa's, you know what I'm saying? Get my tacos and go home. And I want to play my game. And I don't think they necessarily say it like that, because I do believe all these men are going, I want to matter. But there's nobody calling them out. So imagine if we were the ones that did that, to just call them out.
Yeah. I mean, there's certainly a feeling of collective eye rolling towards men, and that really frustrates me, because I don't think it's malintent.
No.
I don't think men are just like, screw it, I just don't even want to try.
Yeah.
I think there really is a desire that God's put into men's hearts, Christian men, to pursue the things of the Lord.
Yeah.
But I don't think they know how. I really don't. And so this has been another question that a lot of guys have, is just like, what if I'm going to find a body, a church, like, what does that even look like? I mean, there's one on every corner, or at least there used to be.
Yeah.
And there's all kinds of flavors, all kinds of different ways of looking at theology and all this stuff, and you can get so wrapped up in that. But like, how do you go about finding? You've seen so many bodies, you've seen so many groups of people. How do you decide?
I think the first thing is it takes courage, because what you're doing is you're literally taking your heart out and putting it on the table, and you're waiting for someone to stab it. And that's courage to do that over and over again. And I think what happens is, more times than not, from my journey or from others, we're looking for a reason why not to go back, versus a reason of, man, if I know my calling, heck, if we knew our calling and we worked at Pizza Hut, we'd be fine. Seriously, because we know who we are, And I think that's it. So when we walk into a church knowing that calling, comes back to that idea of, God, why did you bring me here? Not because I'm some great individual any better than the other, but I see what you want me to see. So use me. Can you use me here? So instead of me going, what can I get from it? But almost like, who can I free in this paradigm? And maybe I'm here for 6 months, and maybe there's a guy I guarantee there's a guy there that's struggling with something, whether it's alcohol addiction or pornography, or just completely doubting themselves, and has never had anybody to unload on like that, to say, maybe that's my calling while I'm there, just to step up and go, God, why did you bring me here today? And that's it, and see what happens, and let the adventure continue from there.
I had talking about men, struggling with alcohol and pornography, and just purity. I had a mentor tell me, it's not about what you started doing, it's about what you stopped doing. Not what you did, but what you didn't do. And that's where the real shame is, and where the real pain you should feel. And it goes back to what we were talking about, of like, if it's like, don't look at the paint, don't touch the paint. If I'm just sitting there like not touching the paint, all I'm thinking about is the paint. But if I change my heart to look at, hey, go do this thing, I forget about the paint. Yeah. I don't have time to think about the paint anymore. I mean, that's what's in my life has been such a transformative idea that God's introduced to me, is that like, just chase. Yeah. Just run.
Yeah. I mean, I feel like men we're all so tangible. We want to do something, and then we sit in a class and we learn instead of doing. And there's nothing. I do not scoff at learning the truth of the scriptures. Not at all. It's just what we do after the fact. Like, are we doing something where they're like, hey, that was a great study, go home. But I wonder if we were called to more. I remember I had a buddy who was struggling in his marriage, and I didn't have the answer. I was like, what about reading that like Love Dare book? And there's some book called Love Dare years ago, and it's not even the book. It's the idea that when he did it, it was 40 days of doing something. He didn't just sit there and like, wait, I hope my wife comes back. I hope my wife comes. Like, I'm going to do something. whether it's I'm going to know that today I'm going to leave flowers or do the dishes or clean the or whatever it is. I'm still doing something. I think so many men we're so tangible. We need to do something that we've turned it into such a scholastic exercise. Until 300 AD, my numbers might be a little bit off. We had more of a Hebrew mindset, which again, I'm simplifying this, which is more communal. Like the idea of course, that we're supposed to do life together, which is kind of where Jesus talked.
It's baked into culture.
Yeah.
That was the culture of the time.
Of course, you know what I mean. And then Aristotle, Socrates, Plato, all those guys. Again, I'm not the well-known with that, but it became much more of a philosophical kind of conversation of teach, learn, and then, okay, great time conversing, and then we go home. Instead of this communal, oh, you need help, let me go help you, along the way kind of thing. Like, check out these flowers, and God dressed these flowers. Like Jesus' examples are all agricultural in life. He was along the way. Take the weed of this field, whatever. Like the things that he did were just along the way. And somewhere we lost that. And we domesticated ourselves in our journey to put things in its right place. And then we turned that the same thing with the church. Like, learn, don't do, hopefully I'm okay. Instead of, we literally have been, I love what Eldridge says. I think he says, like, man, when you become a follower of Jesus, you're not in the nursery. You're like a baby set out in the middle of a battlefield. And so, but somewhere we've said, we got to hold them, man. Drink the milk for a while, which I get it, the milk, but man, there's a lot of guys that should just be swinging swords wherever they can.
It's the grease. Like, we're addicted to the grease. The grease isn't wrong. Like, you need it for the tracks. Like,
Correct.
You need it to go. But like, when you pile it up and your goal is just to lather yourself with the grease and sit on a beach at the end of your life, what's the point?
Yeah.
What a just shallow, not worthy thing to chase.
Yeah. I mean, seriously, bring yourself to your last 5 minutes of your life. Hopefully you're surrounded by those you love and you can hear that machine beeping and the sterile lights staring down at you, and the nurse comes in with the tray and the shots or whatever it is, and you're just staring there. What are you going to regret not having done?
Yeah.
And I believe that speaks into the heart of who God's called us to, of like, no, we better get busy now doing what he's called us to.
So for the guy that's just hearing this is like, yes, I totally get what you're saying. I want to do that. Like, what's the first thing that I do? Where do I go find guys like this that understand this to be around? Because the reason I'm the way I am and I haven't been this way is because the whole community around me does not think that way. So where do I find guys like this?
Well, the first thing we need to do, honestly, before we even get to that point, is you have a dad who is leaning his ear to hear us. In fact, Psalm says he literally is inclining his whole person into us. Like, he has to humble himself just to come into this universe. He's waiting for us to speak. And so I think the first thing is we seek the heart of the Father, and whether that's a 2-minute conversation or whatever you need to do in your prayer life, but ask him, God, I need friends. I need people, and then be looking for it expectantly. I think a lot of times we're not ready. Like, it's like the widow who, is eating bonbons and watching Hallmark movies, waiting for Mr. Right to just knock on the door. It's like, no, get yourself ready, work out, be the person that you would want. It's the same thing with this expectation. So we pray and we go, God, I'm expectant that I'm going to find somebody. It's like the Jeep analogy. I had a Jeep for years. It's amazing how many Jeeps I saw, and I still see them. When you're looking for something, you'll find it. And that's the thing with these guys. Go into this place with a heart of prayer to go, God, I'm expecting you to find somebody in here, whether I bump into them or whether I have to have the courage to step up and have a conversation, but I will make myself available. We want the red carpet to get rolled out. Again, that didn't happen for Peter. Didn't happen for anybody in the scripture that I remember the red carpet being rolled out of. Congratulations, you have won. It's not going to be easy, but it's going to be worth it. So if we have a prayerful heart, and then we go into these churches and say, God, can you bring me to these guys? And then if you don't find it, either try again here or try again somewhere else, but do not give up. Like, that's not in scripture. Like, when I mean that, like, God, do you, like, what am I supposed to do? We start to seek out the Lord and say, God, you have something for me. So you need to bring it. Like, I'm expecting this. But most people don't pray with that kind of boldness to say, God, I need a friend. I need you to bring me a friend. And I'll be a friend to somebody. I just need you to bring me somebody. And man, I believe those are prayers that God answers. So we start there. That's what I would start with.
I love it. What's next for Known Legacy?
Man, we are just continuing to connect with churches, and we're saying, God, as we walk on water, there's moments that, I get about a foot into the ocean, and I'm like, okay, I'm done. But man, we have a lot when it comes to connecting with churches, and we're planning another men's retreat in the fall. And man, we're doing a bunch with studies. We got our book study in a bunch of different areas. So we're excited. We're working with more pastors. We really want to create continue to create a community of pastors that are just there to encourage each other. Man, again, I go back to the 81% of pastors who have nobody, that we want to be that community for these guys to just get away for a couple days and say, hey, let's just connect. And again, I go back to the VFW post analogy again, because these are war heroes that are like, some of these guys have been here for 30 years, serving at the same church, loving people the way that Christ commanded them to love. And man, it can get discouraging. So to have some other brothers that are like, no, I see you're doing amazing. Like, I see what you're doing. And not only I do, but God does too, to again, call them out to who God's already called them to become. And so that's kind of what's next on our horizon, is maybe a kind of a pastor's retreat. And then consistently meeting with other churches. Got some different events on the calendar, working with some local churches to just rise them up. And we have our book study out there in a few different states right now we're working with. So
I love that. What's something recently that you've read, book, article, whatever, podcast that you're just fired up about?
So it sounds funny, but I started reading, and I don't know, it sounds funny, but I started reading Bonhoeffer's Cost of Discipleship. Mm-hmm. And the idea of cheap grace versus costly grace. The idea of, and because again, I'm simple-minded, so costly grace is, I think it was Nietzsche. Again, I'm probably butchering that, but something where he said, like, I have come to the end of my life and found that it's meaningless. That's more of a costly grace. He spent his life to come to that conclusion, versus a first-year freshman at college that says, I'm not going to work because I've come to find out that it's meaningless. And so therefore, because I think the difference is to pursue with all that's in us, the heart of God, to come to the conclusion at the end of our lives, versus I'm not going to do this. I'm going to sin that grace may abound, or it's not worth it, or whatever. But to do our own research, our own seeking, our own journey, to then come to that conclusion at the end of our lives. So not that it's meaningless, that it's all for the glory of God. So,
well, Bill, anything else?
Man, I would say, be that guy.
Yeah.
Be that guy to have the courage. I think in Joshua 1, I think 7 or 8 times was Joshua told to not be afraid, to take courage, all those kind of things, to don't be scared. And I think because he was scared. And so in that, I just hope these guys don't live in that spirit of fear, but power, love, and a sound mind, that they understand that, man, God has called them to something, to imagine if they would accept the reality that God has placed on them, not what the enemy has said about them, and start living that out with courage.
Bill Yuhasz, thank you.
Thank you so much for letting me be on, brother.
Yeah. Well, I fully intend you to be a regular guest, so
good. I hope so.
Prepare yourself for that.
I love our time together. So,
all right. Well, I'm the one who has to go turn this sucker off. So,
have a great day.